Hey everybody, how's it going? Hollywood Pizza here, and I'm joined today by HamHocks42. HamHocks, how are you doing today?
Hey man, doing well. I mean, it's late in the evening when we record this, as we often do, because we're both, we're both working and we have our own individual projects. So here we are. But I'm delighted we have new cards to talk about. I feel like we always have new cards to talk about, but I'm always excited to talk about them.
It's
And we have
crazy how many new cards we're talking about
so
nowadays.
many new cards all the time.
It's
But you know what's great? I'm still excited about it. And when they come out with like new supplementary products, it's like, all right, neat, that's cool, like good stuff, I guess. Like maybe I'll them into a commander deck or two here and there. But then when the new standard set drops, it's like, oh, we're doing it. Like, all right, everybody, step back. I gotta enjoy this. I gotta savor it. It's nice, and that's what we're doing here today. So
yeah, that's
good
definitely
stuff.
like a really good point. Is like even though we see a lot of new cards, um, there's a lot of things to be excited about, honestly, with all these sets. And at the end of the day, new cards are new cards. It's just something to be excited about, whether or not
Mhm.
this constant spoiler season just keeps on chugging along or not. You know, it's just a good time, and I really just like getting some new stuff all the time. I mean, who doesn't? Like everyone
Oh
gets
yeah.
pretty upset about like the formats getting pretty stale pretty quickly. So
Hmm.
I
Mix it
think
up.
it's pretty good that we get some new fresh things coming up. So, we actually have a video on the channel that was us reviewing the rares and the mythics for this set. So, in this video, we're actually going over the other cards that we didn't talk about, and this is going to be our top 10 video. It is going to contain rares and mythics. We're going to have another video as well that's going to be just commons and uncommons, so be on the lookout for that too. So without further ado, we're going to jump right into here. Coming in at number 10, we have Fauna Shaman, a green and a colorless for a 2/2 elf creature. You can pay a green, tap it to discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, and put it into your hand. This card is just phenomenal. On rate, it's just a 2-mana 2/2, which is pretty good. It's a cheap card. And you kind of get this ability where you're able to discard a creature card to go look for something better. Or a lot of the time, you're going to end up wanting to discard cards like Tenacious Underdog or the Transmogrant that we did talk about in our other video as well. Just these cards that you don't mind just throwing them into the graveyard because you're going to get them back later, and then you can go get Shieldred, like a Titan Industry, whatever you need in a situation. And in older formats, Fauna Shaman's really, really powerful because it just slides right into any elf type strategy, right, Ham?
Oh yeah. I mean, 2/2 elf for two. It triggers your other things because, of course, that's just how elves roll. You just have a ton of synergies. But yeah, and the fact that it can allow you to go fetch whatever you need. And if your deck has a large amount of creatures, like yes, the best case scenario, you're discarding reanimation targets. You're discarding cards that you can unearth or you can recur for value. That's obviously the first goal with this. But even if you can't do that, dropping a 6 drop that you can't play yet to go grab a 3 drop that you can, that's not bad. Like, being able to massage your hand and create that kind of gameplay is just good. Like, that's the bottom line of this card. It's just really good. And on top of that, if you have these in your deck, you can have kind of more situational 1 drops, and that's always fun. I love being able to toolbox my decks. So yeah, this thing's great.
Oh yeah, I can definitely agree to all that. I think that this card is just a lot of different types of value. Like obviously, you're not even like going down on cards because you're like replacing the card
Hmm.
that you're essentially discarding. So there's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of things that you could do with this card. It's a reprint, so I mean, like in the previous standard, it had Vengevine, which was definitely a card that really pushed this card over the top because you can just continually just discard 2 Vengevines and then cast a couple creatures, and all of a sudden you have like 10 or more power on the battlefield, and some of it even has haste, and you're kind of just hitting your opponent for a ton of damage. So overall, I think that Fauna Shaman is going to be a card that we're definitely going to see quite a bit of. Our next card here, so we have a Surge Engine. So Surge Engine is actually a card that we saw early in spoiler season, but I think it actually still holds up today. 2 colorless for a 3/2 defender. You can pay a blue for it to lose defender, and instead it gains can't be blocked. That seems pretty good. 2 colorless and a blue. If it's already blue, it turns into a 5/4. And then 4 colorless, 2 blue. You draw 3 cards. You can only activate this once, and you could have to activate it, of course, if you've used the second ability where it becomes blue. So Surge Engine, very reminiscent of Sleeper. That's actually a card that is black that came out in Dominaria United. I think Surge Engine it's probably about the same power level, just because they both draw you cards. Surge Engine I like a little bit more because it's unblockable. I really feel like this card is going to go in these Jin decks because you can just play the Surge Engine down with a little bit of some protection, and then for just a blue it becomes unblockable, and for the rest of the game you can just protect it. You almost don't even need those other 2 abilities, but if you do use those 2 abilities, the first one, it turns into a 5/4 unblockable. And then the most important line of text that's missing from this card is activate as a sorcery.
Yes.
So you can do all these abilities at instant speed.
That's incredible. Yeah. That exactly. So that's exactly the move. You drop it down as a 2-drop, and your opponent has to blow it up like immediately. Or you're right. Like at the very least, starting as early as turn 3, they have a 3/2 smacking them they can do nothing about. Like that is awesome. Like that is nothing shy of freaking awesome. And then like you're saying, you attack with it, and you're crashing in for damage. If they try to remove it, you counter or you protect. You use your slip out the backs or whatever to keep Surge Engine alive. And then at a point in the game when you do have extra mana lying around, sure, at your opponent's end step, pay 3, buff it to a 5/4. Cool. Again, on your opponent's end step, you got 6 mana lying around. You can tap it to just draw 3 cards. Like, that's dope.
Yeah, this card's just strong at all points in the game.
Good. Just super
honestly,
strong. Yeah,
I think it's really, really good. I expect it to get played quite a bit.
Yeah.
Our next card here is actually one that we did go over in our previous video. Looks like I didn't notice that we had actually already talked about this one.
No
but we're actually going to talk about Blade Coal Serpent. So 6 colorless and X for a 5/4. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each double blue spent to cast it. Each opponent discards a card for each double black spent to cast it. And it gets +1/+0, trample, and haste for each double red. So essentially this card's really, really nuts if you're able to get one of each. And it's really nuts if you're actually able to get more of each of these specifically. The main one being, if you get a bunch of red mana, it gets really big. It has trample, it has haste, and it just smashes for quite a ton of damage. I definitely expect to see this card in Gixx's shells, even mono blue shells, mono black shells, mono red shells. I actually think this card is like insanely versatile, right?
Oh, 100%. And the thing that makes it so crazy is that it is different in all of those. Like, it plays completely different depending on the color breakdown that goes into the casting this thing, but all of the combinations are awesome. Like, they all do good work. In your mono blue situation, you get a 5/4 artifact serpent that draws you 3 cards when it enters the battlefield. Sick. You got a good body your opponent has to deal with, and you just completely restocked your hand. You're feeling like $1,000,000. In the black version, you spend 6 mana, and again, there's also an X in the casting cost. So if you have 8 or 10 mana lying around, you can absolutely pump more into this, which is fantastic. But let's assume we're going for 6. You pay 6 black mana, your opponent discards 3 cards. Like, that is savage. And you just put a 5/4 on the battlefield they got to dance with, but they don't, like, you just made them discard all their interaction. So, like, it's pretty great.
Yeah, like,
and then, like you're saying, the mono red version.
Nuts, right?
Mono red version, you put 6 red into this, and you've got an 8/4 trampler crashing in.
Yeah, that's nothing to laugh at.
If you've been successful in your red deck in dealing damage in the early game, that's a kill shot, like, every time.
Yep.
I don't know that, like, a mono red deck is going to be casting 6 drops very often, but if you do, I want it to be this guy. Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think for the black side, if you invoke into this, it's just absurd because, like, you set up a turn where, like, you wipe their board and then you get rid of their whatever's left of their hand, and then on top of that you have a 5/4, which is, yeah, I mean, like, it's so funny because, like, we look at a lot of cards like base stats, and we based off of like their mana cost, and we're like, oh, it's not good enough. But like, listen, a 5/4 is a 5/4. That fights through most things on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're gonna have a pretty decent sized threat left over, and on top of that, it's a card that if you spent the right colors of mana, you're gonna just get potentially up to 3 or more comes into play as abilities. I mean, listen, Blade Coil gets better. Your first one's good. Your second one's even better because you might spend 8 mana on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So yeah, Blade Coil coming in here, and just a really good card coming in at number 8. Number 7 here, we actually have a black card, Misery's Shadow. So kind of like a new take on an older card. So black and a colorless for a 2/2. It's a shade. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, exile it instead. And for 1 colorless, you get to give this card +1/+1 until on a turn. So kind of like a little bit of like a mini Kalitas that you're not getting a token from, but you're able to exile. And this card fights really well with a lot of the creatures in the format. And it's easily a splashable card. The ability is actually colorless. It's not like Nantuko Shade where you needed that black mana off your Cabal Coffer's Hammer. I feel like this card is really efficient and it does a lot of things.
100%. That's the bottom line. This is not a big, sexy, splashy card. You are going to see this deck or see this card in a lot of shells coming out of a lot of sideboards or main decks, just being a good black 2-drop. It hoses all your opponent's death triggers. They're all done, just completely. If your opponent's trying to recur stuff like Tenacious Underdog, too damn bad. It's just gone forever. And like... and like you're saying, that buff, the one generic, there was like Nantuko Shade or like Howard Shade or whatever, like old school shades always required 1 black to give it the +1/+1, which was fine. Like, in mono black decks back in the day, we were more than happy to do that. But the fact that this is generic means that you can put this in multicolored decks and you can still pump whatever into that. You don't have to trigger your pain lands. Like, you can use the colorless activation off those to pump this, so you're not taking damage. And you can use Power Stone mana to pump this thing up too. So if you have extra mana lying around, this body is going to be massive in combat. And that static ability is no joke. So I think this card is, like, you look at it and it's like, it just looks efficient and solid. I think this is going to wreck a lot of people's days. I think this card is going to be a consistent performer.
I actually think this card makes like Suicide Black a deck in Explorer, potentially Pioneer, just because it's a card that has sideboard like abilities for a main deck card, and on top of that, like it has a chance to kind of grow bigger than everything. Like your first one probably dies, but then your second one's like harder to deal with, right? If they don't have removal, and then as the game progresses, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger than what your opponent's playing, and it gets out of hand pretty quick.
Yeah, and it's also a 2-drop. There are a ton of spells that can reanimate 2-drops pretty cheaply. You have things like Can't Stay Away. You have things like Recommission is one that's coming in this set. It's white. There's actually a new black reanimator spell. I think No One Left Behind is what it's called. That's cheaper if it's targeting a small creature. Like, things like that are absolutely on the table to bring this thing, back to the game. If you're in older formats, there's also patch up. But if you're in older formats, you also have like Call of the Death Dweller from Ikoria that could give this thing Death Touch and Menace in addition to everything else it's got going on. So like, I think this card is just good.
Expect to see this card get played in a lot of different strategies: aggressive, mid-range. You could even just see this card as maybe a sideboard card, just because of exile stuff in play. So when it hits the graveyard, I mean, I think this card's solid. It's a card like the Surge Engine in this are similar in the regard of it's good early, it's good later, and that's really what you want out of cards nowadays. You want cards that are either giving you value consistently every turn, or you want cards that are good now and good later. So that way your cards are just never bad, essentially.
Yeah.
Our next card on the list here is actually a really, really crazy card. Phyrexian Flesh Gorger, so 7 mana. It's an artifact creature for a 7/5 Menace lifelink. And then it has Ward with pay life equal to Phyrexian Flesh Gorger's power. And you can play it for prototype, so you can play it as just a 3/3 for 2 black and a colorless. And it still has Menace Lifelink and that ward. I when this card was spoiled, I was like, this card's nuts. And I still feel like that. I think this card's pretty insane, right?
I totally agree. This card's cracked. Like, it's nuts. Paying it for a 3/3 Menace Lifelinker with Ward, where you have to pay 3 life for 3, is awesome. Like, I think Graveyard Trespasser is probably still better in most decks because this requires 2 black, and the Graveyard Trespasser forces your opponent to go down on life, which is meaningful. But if your deck is going for a more aggressive bent, you can make an argument that Menace and Lifelink is definitely, you know, meaningful and worth it. So that's cool. But the flip side, like the upside for Flesh Gorger, is that one, the ward grows if it grows. So that's something. But you can also like blink it, you know, or use effects like you know, in black, like the Feign Death kind of effects where they like come back to the graveyard if they die. And if you do that, it comes back into the 7/5 with Menace Lifelink and pay 7 life ward.
Yeah,
I mean, that's nuts, right? Like,
yeah,
that's
it's just really strong. Like the ward really is what
incredible.
takes it over the top. Like,
Yeah.
it's another card. Same thing we talked about the last few cards. It's good early, it's good later. Never really a time where this card is actually like unplayable. And on top of that, it has like a little bit of protection where like they have to pay life for it to be warded. So, overall, I expect to see this card get played in aggressive strategies, mid-range strategies, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see it in a control deck, honestly, because it's kind of just like a really nuts finisher.
Yeah, totally. Well, and the thing I love about these prototype cards, and Flesh Gorger like exemplifies it perfectly, is as somebody who plays dumb stuff like fight rigging and just, like weird goofy ass reanimator shenanigans, I love the fact that this is a gigantic dumb thing as its base mode. So if I get this under a fight rigging, I am so not mad because I'm going to be getting a 7/5 Menace Lifelink band with a stupid ward on it. Like, I feel like $1,000,000 if I can cheat this into play. But at the exact same time, if I have it in my hand, most of the time, if I have my big dumb payoff in my hand, I need to like get it back into the library or discard it somehow in order to actually use it. Well, this I could just cast out for 3.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden my opponent just has to worry about it.
Yep.
Like, it's just good. Like, yeah, start to finish. It's
solid
just
card.
It's just solid. Like,
Yeah.
it's just rock solid.
Our next card here is an interesting one. It has the Meld ability. So 3 colorless, you get a 2/2 with double strike. It's a Phyrexian dragon. Whenever it enters a battlefield from your graveyard, you can discard your hand if you do draw 3. It has Unearth, so 3 colorless, 2 red. So essentially you bring it back for a turn and then it gets exiled at the end step, or if it would leave the battlefield, it gets exiled. It ends up melding with Mishra, claimed by Gixx, which is 2 colorless, black red for a 3/5 that whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life, gains X, and you gain X, where X is number of attacking creatures. And if you have this plus the dragon engine out, then you get to flip it into Mishra, Loss of Phyrexia, which is a 9/9. And whenever it enters or attacks, you get to choose 3. So target opponent discards 2, 3 damage to any target. Destroy an artifact or planeswalker. Creature control, gain menace and trample. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1, and you get to make 2 power stones. So the Mishra side of it, obviously you get a ton of abilities, but the Mishra side of it, I feel like it's just like a fine card. Like, yeah, it's got some power to it, and obviously if you get to the Lost of Phyrexia side of it, it's going to be pretty nuts. The main thing that we're talking about here in our top 10 is actually the Phyrexian Dragon Engine side. So this card can go in any deck as just a 3-mana 2/2 with double strike, but if you're playing red, that Unearth is really, really strong, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, this card, like Phyrexian Dragon Engine, double strike is a big freaking deal. Like, if I'm playing, say, like even mono green, where I have stuff like Defiler of Vigor or Fight Rigging, even that like could just buff my team or buff individual cards, I'm considering, like, it would not be crazy to put Phyrexian Dragon Engine in that deck. You know, just because double strike is that freaking good. Being able to buff a double striker that enters as a 2/2 on turn 3 can hand you the game. If you have access to the red mana so you can get the Unearth, even better, because you're going to be draw cards off it. It's great. Being able to take advantage of the meld is obviously where you want to be. So if you want to be in some kind of Rakdos aggro deck, because Mishra claimed by Gixx is an aggro finisher.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's clearly what that card is. The goal is have a bunch of little weenies on the field, drop Mishra, attack. Well, because it's all Mishra also says whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life, you gain X life, or X the number of attacking creatures. Mishra himself does not need to attack to do that. It just triggers upon any attack. So that's great. Yeah, but then if it and the Dragon Engine are attacking in the same turn, then you can meld them. So that's obviously where you really want to be. The fact that Dragon Engine is such a versatile, straightforward card that like any red deck can reasonably take advantage of. And Mishra is just a good aggro finisher on his face. Like the fact that both of these cards are good on their own and can win you the game on their own is really what makes this meld pair stand out over the other two, in my opinion. Like, you don't need to meld to beat your opponent. They have to answer both of these. I don't really feel like the other meld pairs have that going for them.
That's actually a really good point. Like you're right.
Yeah.
Both of these cards are must-answer threats, whereas the other cards are kind of like supplemental cards that can pay you off into bigger cards. But the Dragon Engine and the Mishra by themselves are kind of like just standalone cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, Phyrexian Dragon Engine actually coming in at number 5 here. Definitely expect to see it in all kinds of decks. I mean, don't be surprised if you see this and they're really just splashing for this card. I mean, drawing 3 is huge.
It's
it really
huge.
is, especially in an aggro deck. So our next card here is another powerful one. Legendary creature, we have Myrel, Shield of Argive, or Argive, sorry if I say it wrong. 3 colorless and a white for 3/4. Legendary creature, human soldier. During your turn, your opponent can't cast spells, activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. And then whenever this card attacks, create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact tokens, or X the number of soldiers you control. This card's nuts. It pretty much stops your opponent from playing Magic on your turn. And whenever you attack, if you even have another soldier, you're getting 2 creatures. If not, you're just getting 1 automatically from the Myrel. Yeah, you're going to see this card and you're going to lose to it.
Yeah. What if Teferi Time Raveler was rabble rousing? Like, yeah, I think it's pretty good. Like, this is nuts. Like, this.
Yeah, this
is bonkers.
Yeah.
Yeah. That silence ability, like that static ability, is insane. Like, they can still channel and cycle lands, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that's like the only thing they can do.
Yes, because it doesn't
blocking.
say lands on it, so yeah, they can still do that. Yep.
But I think that's it. Like artifacts, creatures, enchantments. I mean, theoretically, like if they had a planeswalker like Teferi Master of Time that you could activate at instant speed, they could do that. But
that's the exception. That's like the only real thing that's
I think it's the only one that can do
through.
that. Because you might think, oh, but Wandering Emperor is like, well, yeah, but you have to cast her first. This shuts that down. So yeah, pretty brutal. Like this card is nasty.
This is like the type of card where like your opponent plays it and then you're like, oh shit, they're gonna get to untap with it, and that's probably game. Because like it just makes you play at sorcery speed. Like you spend your turn killing Myrel, but then they have like, you know, like a backup plan anyways, and then you just lose to that. I mean, this card's like a build your own army by itself, and on top of that, it essentially just shuts down your opponent's complete game plan. And yeah, this card is definitely number 4 here on our list for a reason, because it's just really, really strong. Our next card here is another powerful card. We actually have Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. Speaking of Planeswalkers and Teferi, 3 colorless, double blue for 4 loyalty. Whenever you draw a card, it gets a loyalty counter. 0, draw a card, -2, you get a 2/2 spirit token. With Vigilance, whenever you draw a card, it gets a +1/+1 counter. -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand, then you shuffle the rest into their deck. So overall, Teferi is... I think this is like one of the best Planeswalkers we've had in a while, honestly. I really do. I actually think that this card makes control... I actually think this makes control viable. And what I actually find really interesting about this card specifically is that blue is getting creatures. Like, blue never used to really get creatures, and you actually have Surge Engine, you know, obviously this Teferi, you have Sky Strike Officer. You can actually make a blue beatdown deck. like a
Yeah.
blue mid-range beatdown deck, pretty much. Or you just play blue-white control, blue-black control,
Mm-hmm.
Esper control with Teferi, and you're probably gonna do a lot of work with this card. Like those, I don't think people understand how crazy lore scale Codal is.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It's easy to underestimate. And that -2 is going to be teaching a lot of people all about it. Yeah, the fact that so I think what we're going to see a lot with this card, a lot of the time is going to be Tef on 5, down tick, boom. Spirits online. And then from there on, you have two things you need to answer. You just do. You got to get them off the field. Because if they can untap with that, they're going to draw their card for turn. So they both buff. They 0-tick Tef, both buff. Then if they have any other draw spells, if they're sitting on like Tezzeret Betrayal Flesh, uptick, draw 2, great. Kaito, uptick, draw. You've got Thirst for Thirst for Discovery. It's a 3-drop. Draw 3. Discard either a basic land or 2 cards. That's 3 draws that they get off this. It's not hard to draw a lot of cards these days. And Teferi is gonna this card. That ultimate being a -12 when its starting loyalty is 4 sounds like it's crazy far away. It's really not. I think even in standard, we will see this card ult.
Yeah, you play
Not all
like
the
a Silver
time,
Scrutiny.
but it's gonna happen.
Yeah, you play like a
Yeah.
Silver Scrutiny for like
Scrutiny's
4 or
great.
5,
Yep.
and you're already almost to that ultimate.
Yep, 100%. Or the Blade Coil Serpent we were talking about. In a blue control deck, if you can pump 6 blue into it, that's 3 +++ counters on your Spirit and 3 loyalty counters on your Tef.
And you get a 5/4.
And you get a 5/4 body that can protect it. Exactly.
Yeah.
The opportunities are here. This could be, this thing could be insane.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think we are going to see like an Azorius control deck. I don't know if it's going to bubble up to be like the tippity top where it was for a minute there, but this is not Teferi Hero Dominaria. It's not. But I think it's the closest we're going to see in standard in a while, and it's only one color, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. It doesn't it's not like stopped by its colors where you know that it only really gets played in this color combination. Like this card can just go in all kinds of blue decks, mid-range decks, control decks.
Well, and
even
I
aggro
just throw out
decks.
I throw out Azorius control as kind of just because that's the habit, I just feel like that's what you do. But why not Dimir? Why not Dimir control with Invoke Despair and Tenacious Underdog and, your Reckoner Bankbusters and those kind of things?
Yeah.
Why not? That
and
Shale Dread for good measure.
Right?
What the hell? Why not, right?
Bankbuster,
that could be insane.
Put more counters on this. That's that card's almost like an all-star with this, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Yeah.
So overall, Teferi, obviously in our top 3 here. This is definitely a card you're going to see. In my opinion, and Hams, you're definitely gonna.
I'm right there with you, man. Yep.
See this card, and you're gonna lose to it, and it's just
gonna happen.
It's gonna draw a lot of cards, and you're just gonna be looking at your opponent with a Teferi on the battlefield that's potentially gonna ultimate, and you can't do anything about it. And
it is one of those
crazy.
Also, just a little public service announcement: be aware. If the card you are casting draws you cards or if it puts them in your hand, those are 2 different effects. Memory Deluge does not trigger Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. Be aware of that.
Yep. Good shout. And that one more thing, that 0 ability is really a +1.
It totally, yeah.
Because it's, the static is when you draw a card, it gets a loyalty. So it's funny that that's a 0, but in reality it ends up being a +1.
Yeah.
Our next card here at number 2 is actually a pretty busted card. That's a reprint. I feel like we've been getting a lot of reprints these last 2 sets, but a card I never thought we'd see again, Diabolic Intent. 1 colorless and a black for a sorcery. As additional cost to cast it, you sacrifice a creature. Search your library for any card and put it in your hand, then shuffle. The first thing that everybody was talking about was Greasefang, because it just obviously makes Greasefang a lot better.
Yeah, that combo just clicks. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it definitely helps with the Cat Index, and in standard, standard there's a lot of things you can sacrifice. Tenacious Underdog. The Transmogrant that's in this set.
The Cultist, the 1-drop, the skeleton, Like that's a great target for this. Yeah,
Oh yeah. I hate saying this, but this is a card that could get banned.
I believe it.
Let's just be honest here. It is a
Yeah,
card that
totally.
could get banned. Like the power level of this card's like through the roof, and it only gets better the older formats that you go.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is a reprint I never thought in a million years we would see in the standard. This when you read it, you think, oh, they don't make cards like this anymore. Well, but here they do. Like,
Yeah, here they
apparently they do.
do. Yeah.
Because like demonic tutor is like the gold standard for tutor effects. 1 black, search your library for a card, put it in your hand, shuffle. This has the same casting cost, the same text line, with only one downside that you have to sacrifice a creature. The truth is, sacrificing a creature in some decks is frankly an upside. There are some creatures with great death triggers you want to be like any format where Stitcher Supplier is legal. This card is phenomenal. Like if you can play Stitcher Supplier on 1 and eat it intent on 2, like then you've milled 6 cards and you have grabbed any card in your entire deck and put it in your hand. Like that's gross. Like that's just gross. You know, we don't have an effect. We don't have a 1-drop like that in standard right now, but there are a lot of great 2-drops with death triggers. You know, we have cards like Novice Occultist or Undead Butler that can do cool things. So there are options. None quite that powerful, but still, if you're in any kind of sack deck, if you can take advantage of sacrificing creatures for value, or if you're in token strategies where you have a ton of little expendable critters lying around that you don't really care about, Diabolic Intent becomes amazing. Like if you're in like to the point where I would even consider splashing this in certain decks. Like if you can imagine, you know, I'm thinking like Naya Go Wide. Like I would gladly sacrifice one little citizen to go grab Jetmir, you know, and it only cost me 2 mana to do that. I might even be able to just cast him. Like what? I don't know. Like that's kind of we're talking about like a 3-color deck splashing for a 4th color. So I don't know. That might be a little far-fetched, but all the same.
I mean,
This
if you have
card's
another
great.
Diabolic Intent, you can just search for the land you're missing, right?
There you go.
Yeah,
It
this card's
yeah.
nuts.
It's nuts.
You're
This
gonna
card's
see this card
incredible.
in every single format.
Yeah, 100%.
I truly, would truly believe that. Definitely number 2 for a reason. And our number 1 is actually another black card. That's really, really busted. We have Gixx, Yawgmoth Praetor. 2 black and a colorless for a 3/3. It's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. And then 4 colorless, triple black, discard X cards, exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among them without paying their mana cost. So anytime that you connect with a creature, you're actually going to be able to draw a card, and in EDH, essentially it makes it so that like everyone gets a draw card if they're hitting another player, but for us specifically, Arena, Constructed, Standard, Explorer, all these formats, this card's pretty busted, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
If you curve out, you go 1-drop, 2-drop, and then this, and then you connect with both of those cards, the game's probably over. Just because like you're dealing your opponent damage, you're on tempo with the curve, and then on top of that, you're refilling your hand. And these are all things that, as an aggro deck, you're really happy to see. So, yeah, I mean, these are all reasons why Gixx is number 1. I really, truly believe this is the most powerful card in the set.
Yeah. I'm glad to agree. Like it's straight up nuts. And I also like I want to point out too, like this is drawing cards, combos with Teferi, just saying. Combos with Sheldred, just saying. And on top of that, this also could fit into the exact same deck as Rafine, which already wants to be going wide and attack with multiple things so that you can draw cards. So, like, the sheer amount of card draw and card acceleration that you can get in these colors is unreal. And the fact that Gixx not only draws you a whole boatload of cards, it also doesn't force you to activate it if you're low on life. You don't have to take the hit, which is really great. Like that's huge Because if that was not the case, you could literally be in a position where it's like, well, I have lethal, but I die if or I don't have lethal this turn, but I could have lethal. I can have you on a 2-turn clock right now, but I would just die if I attack you. So I can't. Like, that would suck, but that doesn't happen here. But not only is it just drawing an obscene amount of cards while being good on stats, it also has a payoff on it for having drawn a bunch of cards. And that payoff could involve you just playing like a quarter of your opponent's deck for free. Like, this card's nuts, man.
Yeah,
Like, this is
this card's
cracked.
nuts. Like this is like Black didn't need any better cards, and then they printed
No, they
like
were doing
the
fine.
nuts 3-drop. Like, yeah, you go Sleeper into Underdog into this into Shieldred into Invoke Despair, and I mean you're probably not playing Magic anymore. Like your
No,
opponent's
your
just
opponent
dead.
isn't. No, that little button on the top right is looking awfully nice in that situation. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
This card's nuts.
But yeah,
Just nuts.
Gixx is pretty nuts. So yeah, I mean overall, I think that this set's actually really strong. I think there's going to be a lot of different cards that are going to impact Standard. You can actually check out our other video on the channel that reviews all the rares of Mythics, and we're going to have another video for commons and uncommons, so definitely check all that content out. I hope you're just as excited as Ham and I are for this set. It's going to be a blast to play. By the time you see this, we would have already played our early access and kind of gotten a feel for the set, so we'll go ahead and see how essentially our review and our top 10 for these cards look in a few days to potentially like a month or so, when the set actually drops and we start to see these cards get played. But overall, I'm really excited about this set, and I think there's a lot of cards outside of this top 10 that are going to have a huge impact, right?
Oh yeah. No, I agree. And the archetypes that we're seeing supported in this set are a little bit different than stuff that we've seen in Standard already. So I'm really excited to see how things get shaken up. I think a lot of the mid-range decks that we have right now will probably adopt like 1 or 2 of the cards from this set, but otherwise look more or less unchanged. What I'm really hopeful for is that a powerful artifact themed deck can rise to the top. Because for the last year, we have been looking at cards that came out, especially in Kamigawa. That was a big one, where I found myself saying over and over and over again, if we get good artifact support, this card's going to be great. If we get good artifact support, this card is going to be great. Well, this set is bringing with it a ton of good playable artifacts. I hope some of those other cards, like Tezzeret Betrayer of Flesh, Disruption Protocol, like Moonsnare Prototype, I hope, Reality Heist, I hope those cards get an opportunity to shine in an environment where they can really pop. That's what I want to see. So that's my hope for the set. I think the right tools are here. I think the right pieces are coming in.
100%. I think that this set is just really strong, and I think that there's a lot of standalone cards that are going to make new strategies, and then there's a lot of cards that are going to make the strategies that are already available even better, potentially turning like some tier 2 decks into tier 1 decks. But yeah, overall, I know there's like a lot of I feel like I know a set is good where half of the player base says it's not powerful enough, and then the other
Yes.
half says it's broken, which usually just means that
Mm-hmm.
it's a nice, good, balanced, powerful set.
Yeah.
And I get like a lot of Neon Dynasty vibes from this set, so we'll see if it lives up to that. I think Neon Dynasty is like the best set that came out in a very long time. So we'll see if Brothers War ends up being about the same. But overall, yeah, just a really phenomenal set. If you made it this far in the video, we do appreciate it. It would be great if you hit that subscribe button, bell notification, liked, left a comment down below as well, especially letting us know what you think of this set and what you thought of our top 10. You can find all of our content. Ham and I stream, and Ham has his own YouTube channel, so you can definitely find the links to that down below, as well as links to the 3 tournaments that we host. We host 3 tournaments a month. All are free to play, and you're going to also potentially get invites from those tournaments into one of our other bigger tournaments. We have a yearly event that's going to be pretty awesome too, so definitely check all that information down below in the description, and I hope that you stay cheesy.